Thank you very much for having me here today and allowing me to talk to you a little bit about how egg farmers of Canada have been trying to change consumer perception, change perception in general, in particular by facing challenges head-on and also by responding to change and getting ahead of the change, more importantly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe some of the pressures that we've been under. I'm going to do that very briefly because I think you're going to realize that it's fairly consistent with many of the pressures that your industry is under and some of the ones that Stan described, as well as the ones that Mr. Solomon described. And then I'll just very briefly talk to you about a couple of our programs that are allowing us to address some of the challenges. I won't bore you with too many details. So for many years, egg farmers and farmers in general have simply produced with very little criticism and very few challenges. And I think it's safe to say that we're recognizing that the tide is changing. And based on the presentation that we heard from Mr. Solomon, I think it's even more safe to say the tide has changed. The general public, consumers, and interest groups, they're becoming more sophisticated, they're becoming more hungry for knowledge, and they're becoming more influential. And as a result, you, our farmers, and farmers all over are facing lots of different pressures and quite often at the same time. Obviously, you're aware that there's all kinds of pressures from an environmental perspective, food safety, animal care, policy, regulation, you name it. In Canada, we also have a unique situation, and you heard a little bit about this this morning and probably throughout the course of your policy conference. There's a new trend in terms of public attacks on supply management. We used to see the attacks on supply management sort of ebb and flow, and they were usually linked to when there were trade agreements. But we've really been seeing a more consistent attack on the system that include calls to dismantle the system. But more importantly, I think what's interesting to note is that the messages are also changing. You heard Mr. Solomon talk about the message on price. Those are messages that are more directly aimed at the consumer. And those are certainly things that are going to need to be addressed. So I think obviously after having enjoyed peace and quiet for such a long time, facing new challenges is not really easy, especially when we think and have been doing a fairly good job. I think what's become very clear to our farmers and I think farmers generally is that if we don't accept the challenges and start to make changes on our own, the changes are going to be forced on us. So from an egg farmer perspective, I think we realize that we've enjoyed this social license that Stan described or defined to produce for more than 40 years. And I think this is particularly true in the case of eggs and milk and dairy because our products are staple foods. But in exchange for this, egg farmers have in exchange for this social license, egg farmers feel that they have a responsibility to not only comply with standards, but to set standards of excellence and then go about meeting or exceeding them. Egg farmers look at this as part of a big package. They feel that it's important that we look at our industry as a whole. And it's kind of interesting because I promised you I did not see Mr. Solomon's presentation in advance. But the way we quite often talk about it in our industry is that our farmer is our brand, and that brand must be backed with the highest possible food safety, animal care, traceability, environmental, and other standards. So with that background in mind, I'll just talk to you very briefly about 3 of the programs that egg farmers have put in place or are putting in place to deal with some of the challenges, as well as our Pride in Every Egg campaign. EFC's on-farm food safety program is called Start Clean, Stay Clean. Some of the more technical details are that it's based on HACCP principles. It's been technically reviewed by CFIA and recognized by our board, Egg Farmers of Canada, since 2007. Now that said, our first on-farm food safety program was instituted in 1990. The primary focus of the program is on biosecurity and environmental testing on a specific type of salmonella called SE. And more recently, Egg Farmers of Canada developed an on-farm food safety program for the pullet sector. And for those of you that don't know what a pullet is, it's an input into our industry. It's the young birds before they mature to be able to lay eggs. So generally speaking, our program is going well. We have virtually 100% participation, but it certainly wasn't easy in the beginning. Some farmers resisted, but what we found was that as more farmers began implementing it, they started to see that their productivity was increasing as a direct result to the measures required under the Start Clean, Stay Clean program, and that just sort of created an environment where more and more farmers participated. So I'm not talking to you about our on-farm food safety program because I want to sell it to you. I know that other industries, including yours, have robust on-farm food safety programs, but I think the point here that I want to make is that the requirements, the recording requirements that come from an on-farm food safety program like this actually lead very nicely into a platform for helping us deal with other challenges and some other important challenges, and that includes traceability. So obviously food scares are rare, but we do know very well that they can and they do happen. And if and when that happens, it's obviously desirable to be able to minimize the risk to human health and be able to trace back to the source as quickly and directly as possible. Secondary to human health, and I'm going to repeat, secondary to human health, it's also desirable to minimize financial impacts if you can isolate one specific source and shut down one operation as opposed to having to shut down several operations. Very quickly, some of the technical details. It's a program that was initiated in late 2009 by Egg Farmers of Canada with some funding from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. It's a set of standard requirements. It's a one-up, one-down traceability system. It actually included more than 70 participants from the egg supply chain. There were a lot of simulations. There was a lot of testing that went on. It includes data management, premise ID, bird track and trace, as well as egg track and trace. It meets the performance targets of the federal government, and I'll just give you an example. The standard is 48 hours to be able to trace back, and in some of the simulations that we did, we were actually able to trace back within a few hours back to the source. So certainly that's positive. The program was approved by our board in 2012. Obviously, it's not fully implemented. I don't think we were expecting a big bang. I think, as with all new programs, we were expecting it to be incremental. But I think what is very interesting is that we already do have a number of graders that are participating, and we also have quite a bit of retail uptake on this particular idea or system. So as I mentioned at the outset of my presentation, and what you've been hearing from the other presenters as well, is consumer and interest groups have become significantly more influential, and one of the results has been that certain companies are beginning to demand private standards be met by their suppliers. From a Canadian perspective, this is actually more of a trend in the US, but the result has been that the Canadian subsidiaries of those companies are also asking for some private standards to be met by their suppliers. Some of the ones that we're faced with in our industry is American Humane Certified and Certified Humane. So probably Stan has heard of those before. I'm not sure if you have, but we're certainly facing those right now. While EFC's animal care program is based on the Canadian Code of Practice, and is a very strong program, we're obviously facing external pressures to evaluate and have started evaluating our program vis-a-vis some of the private standards that I mentioned to you on the previous slide. The Canadian Code of Practice upon which our current program is based is under review, but we're expecting that to take quite a bit of time. And egg farmers really want to respond to this new challenge and participate in the solution. And I think that's really the key word: respond to this challenge by participating in the solution. And they really believe that time is of the essence. So what we've begun doing in our industry is we've started to do a gap analysis of our current animal care program vis-a-vis some of the requirements of the private standards. The objective is to build on our strong, and I will repeat, on our existing, and I'll repeat, already strong program. But what we want to do is to match or exceed private requirements. So ultimately, what we want to avoid is a situation where our producers are faced with a multitude of different private standards that they have to try and meet if they want to continue to be supplying their product. in one of the ways that we're doing that is some of our, I think I forgot to advance my slide. Sorry about that. Some of our industry representatives are already meeting with the owners of the private standards, and the objective really is to try and get them to understand that our program is as good as or better than some of the standards that they might be requiring, even if it's under a different name. So in other words, what we ultimately hope to achieve is that when we roll out our new animal care program, it will meet or exceed and is accepted as equal to some of the private welfare standards. So moving now a little bit more to focus on our approach with the consumer. Egg Farmers of Canada launched its national Pride in Every Egg campaign in 2012. The campaign, I think, is very important to understand. It's not a marketing campaign. It's not about selling more eggs. Ultimately, the idea is that we want Canadians to meet the hardworking people that bring them fresh, locally produced, and safe eggs that they eat every single day. The overall strategy is to create a positive connection between the general public and the farmer, our egg farmer, and ultimately use that as a platform to communicate our commitment to social responsibility. The campaign includes television, social media, online advertising, and print. There is also a call to action to visit www.eggs.ca to meet our farmers, but also to find out a little bit more about egg farming in Canada. I think what's kind of interesting is that most Canadians feel that it is important that they buy Canadian eggs. They assume their eggs come from Canada, but they don't really know exactly where they come from. So that's one of our call to actions. So really, in conclusion, I think what I want to leave you with is that Canadians believe in our farmers. And from our perspective, our farmers are our brand. And that brand not only helps them sell their products, but it does other things like help maintain support for supply management and to allow them to continue to do what they love to do. It's very important, though, from our perspective, that the social license is not taken for granted and it needs to be backed up. From our perspective, egg farmers want to maintain the trust that they enjoy from the consumers and the Canadian public, and they want to be seen as the front runners in a variety of different practices, and that includes food safety, animal care, traceability, environmental care, and any other requirements that are expected of them. And I think the most important part here is my last sentence, and that's going to be, even if it means embracing rather than fighting change. Thank you.